CultivatED Marketer, Episode 29, Generative AI with Martin Waxman. Today's episode, we talk with Martin Waxman, MCM and APR at the KCIABC BCS Summit, where we talk generative AI and the benefits and considerations of this new resource for communicators and marketers. Welcome to CultivatED Marketer, where we talk marketing professional development so your garden of opportunity grows. This is Brent Bowen, and I'm out without my partner in crime, Matt Tidwell, today, but I am going to introduce and provide a quick overview of our guest for today's episode. It's Martin Waxman. He's the Associate Director of the Future of Marketing Institute, and we talk generative AI with Martin. He was the keynote speaker at February's KCIABC BCS Summit, and that's where we caught up with Martin. We talk about the benefits of generative AI for marketers and communicators, including accelerating work, improving and potentially enhancing the quality by allowing us to think more strategically about the work we do, freeing us up from mundane or repetitive tasks, and also using the tools, generative AI tools, to drive consistency. But we also talk about some of the cautionary tales and considerations with Martin, things like accuracy and privacy. Matter of fact, we, just recently finished up March Madness, and I was using generative AI to do some polling questions around Cinderella teams for the NCAA tournament. And generative AI, ChatGPT specifically, provided information or a response that were for teams from the 2022 tournament. I said, these teams don't look right. And lo and behold, they were from the 2022 tournament, not this year. We also talk about bias and sensitivity being one of the biggest considerations. There was a use case with someone I work with around engineering, and March was, Women's History Month, and provided a prompt wanting notable professionals in a given profession, given industry for Women's History Month. And the first list we got back were all men. So these are all considerations as we're looking at generative AI, specifically ChatGPT. There are others that are being built into all sorts of different tools. I give a talk and we reference this. I just got back from Digital Summit in Chicago, where I got a chance to hear from Robert Rose at the Content Marketing Institute. And he talks about incorporating generative AI in every facet or step of your workflow from a marketing or communication standpoint. And I gave a talk on using generative AI to produce audio and video, most notably podcasting. Very meta of me, right? So to talk about podcasting, and one of the things we speak to on that topic is how generative AI at this point, one, is going to be incorporated into a number of different tools. So any marketing or communication software tool is going to have a generative AI component that's forthcoming. But two, right now, the best way to maybe think about generative AI is a tool to help shape communication, like a good sculptor needs to create a form. But the fine detail work, and this is something Robert spoke about too, the fine detail work right now needs to happen by a human. And there needs to be that human supervision or human intervention to really help shape that message, because we're in the trust and credibility business. And it's with those two thoughts, I'm going to leave you and have you hear our conversation with Martin Waxman and his thoughts on the current state of generative AI for marketing and communication professionals. Welcome to CultivatED Marketer, where we talk marketing professional development so your garden of opportunity grows. This is Brent Bowen.
And I'm Matt Tidwell. Welcome, everybody. So excited about today's guest actually excited for a couple of reasons. We're actually coming to you from the terrific KCIABC Business Communicators Summit. And many of our listeners have heard us talk about that event before. It's a great opportunity for those of us locally here in the Kansas City area to get an entire day of professional development. And believe me, it's an action-packed day. And luckily, we have with us the event's keynote speaker, Professor Martin Waxman. And Martin and I have known each other for a while now. I got a chance to hear Martin speak at IBC World Conference, actually, the last one this past June in Toronto. Martin's from Toronto, and he was there on a panel, I believe, talking AI at the time, Martin, and it was really terrific. And so I made a mental note of that because guess what started happening after June at every conference? AI becomes the go-to topic, right? Because as marketers, we're learning, and we just talked about that in Martin's terrific keynote section that he just had. So Martin, thanks for coming on with us today. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you. It is great to be here. One, because usually if you're on a podcast, I'm sitting at home, never face to face. So it's kind of, I was really looking forward to this because, you get to see reactions. If you're rolling your eyes, I'll go, okay, maybe that's not the right approach.
Little smiles. Yeah. Thank you, Martin. In your talk today, I'm so excited because just a moment ago, we were talking about some of the parallels of exploration in AI and some of the use cases where I'm making use of it and the value that I'm seeing. And in your talk today, you discuss how AI is transforming the nature of marketing and PR. And so I have a two-part question, right? One side of each coin. How do you see AI enhancing the capabilities of our profession? And then on the flip side, how could it impact the authenticity of content creation?
Okay, those are great questions. And because I've been media trained, I'm going to choose to only answer one. No, just kidding. Okay, so the first part, how is it changing the profession? Really, if you think about it, it's similar to what happened with technology and email. I'm old enough to have begun work on a typewriter, an electric typewriter, but that was still, and then having had a chance to use fax machines, and then email came in and we got used to that. I think AI is going to be all of that and more, just because one, it's speed, two, it's a tool, it's search, it's a knowledge database all in one. And so we need to think about, okay, how are we doing our jobs today? Which of these tools can help us? Which can hinder us potentially? And I like to look at it as an opportunity for growth. So how can we do what we're doing better? And how can we take what we love to do, hang on to that and get better at using these machines to augment us versus using the tools, just say, oh, great, I don't have to do that and I don't have to do that. And I don't, because if that's the case, all of a sudden, you're not really providing value to your organization. And so why would they need you? We need to figure out how to provide value using AI.
So when somebody questions you about authenticity, though, specifically, I know that's the big concern in the realm for marketing and communications is this notion of authenticity and maintaining that authenticity.
It is. And do you disclose when you're using AI? How do you disclose? Right now, I'm a pretty big proponent of disclosing. And so when I say to that's one of the things when I teach digital marketing, for example, students, I encourage my students to use generative AI tools just because it's a safe place for them to figure out how they're going to use them, get some skills that hopefully will help them in the marketplace, when they're looking for a job. But I also ask them how to fact check, to talk about that. I ask them about their prompting strategy to see what they're doing and really what logical way they're asking questions, or are they just asking one simple, hey, do this, do that? Or are they giving a more structured prompt where they're teaching it to produce an output by coding with words? And really, in a way, coding is almost like storytelling. It's a form of storytelling that many of us who don't have that background were afraid of or didn't know how it worked. But now we're able to tell a machine, do this, then this, then this, then this. It's a great opportunity to learn a different mode of thinking, and then, of course, to fact check everything. And fact checking is so important. What are you doing around that? And then how are you disclosing? Where did you use it?
Yeah, I know we're going to touch on skills here in a little bit specifically, but I think that notion of structuring coding is a great example. It's almost like structuring an argument or having you're having a conversation with a colleague is the way I've started to think about it. How would I have this conversation with a colleague? And now I'm just having it with with AI as opposed to doing follow-up questions and probing and still providing strategic value into that input.
Yeah. One thing that struck me about a month ago is if you're in communications, you know what a media advisory is. And a media advisory is who, what, when, where, why, and how. It's really the essence. And when we're prompting an AI system, if we just take that formula, the 5 W's, and figure out how to structure that and then say to the system, do you have any questions? Do you need more information? Find out what it's missing. All of a sudden, our outputs hopefully will improve. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, because it is statistical predictions like a coin toss, right? Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong.
Great. Martin, I know when I first heard about AI, one of the scary things for me, and I can't remember if it was a 60 Minutes episode or something, but I know it went viral, was this ability for AI to mimic humans, right? And so I think one of the first ones I thought was like an Obama deep fake, if you will. And it was like, ooh, this thing is real and it's here to stay and we need to pay attention, at least on the visual side. But I know your exploration of AI trends includes some of this topic around human-sounding synthetic voices, deepfake video and images, natural language generation, relational chatbots. Which of these trends do you believe will have the most profound impact on marketing and PR?
I think all of them taken together, will have an impact in a way because we have these different factors that are being integrated into chatbots. So prior to ChatGPT, a chatbot interaction was pretty boring and dull. They popped up. They were annoying. You had to repeat the same information over and over again. But ChatGPT has, given them a little bit of personality, more knowledge. Not all of that knowledge is true. And as we start to see more embodied AI chatbots, so they won't only be a voice, you'll be able to look at a synthetic face and have a conversation with it. They'll start to be these always-on assistants who are there. And the question is, who is programming them? Who is setting their goals? And can the company that produced this chatbot sell my data to someone else so that if, say, I'm walking by a store and I linger for a second by a shirt that, has caught my eye, the AI will say, oh, yeah, you know what? I think you'd look really good in that. Why don't we try it on? We try it on, not why don't you try it on? And all of a sudden, I'm in a situation where I'm being sold, but I didn't realize I was going to be sold. So I think those are issues we have to pay attention to. But to your point about those deep fakes and mimicry, really, when you think of it, AI systems are a lot like comedy impressionists. They sound really real. So if we closed our eyes, we think, oh, yeah, that is whoever it is, Matt Damon or Ben Affleck. But if we open them, we see, no, it's not. And so I think we have to do the same thing with AI, open our eyes, and that comes down to media literacy.
Pointing out some of the potential concerns and pitfalls with AI and some of the things that marketers and communicators should be considerate of. So you mentioned this notion of data usage and privacy, talked about disclosure. There are a number of other ethical considerations when you have a marketing or communication professional that's thinking about really investing their time and using AI as a companion and tool for their planning or any of the completion of their work. What are some of those other considerations from an ethical standpoint they should be looking at? I know bias is
that's what I was going to say. Bias is probably one of the biggest ones because the data sets are trained on, what happened in the past. And so they don't necessarily reflect society today. Plus the data is biased. It's North American, mostly for the chatbots that most of us use versus something that might have been representative of Europe or Asia or South America. And so we're getting responses that may not be a reflection of what the world currently is. And so we have to pay attention to that. I mean, one common example, you ask an AI image generator to give you an image of a doctor, it will likely be a white male, or a nurse, it'll be a white female. And so for us as marketers and communicators, we need to step back and look at those images and say, okay, is this right? I did this for a lecture I was doing. I wanted to show a robot in a newsroom with reporters. And I put diverse reporters. First one I got out, it was all white males with reporters and one robot, which looked like a male. And I looked at that and I went, okay, no, that's not quite what I wanted to do. And I went back and forth. I never got it to give me what I wanted. And I put that down, I think, to maybe my prompting or maybe my frustration or maybe my impatience. So we need to step beyond that. The other thing is the algorithms themselves are biased because they reflect the biases of the data scientists or computer engineers who prepared them. And that happened, I think Amazon, with one of their HR applications a few years ago, had an issue with that they were trained to throw away resumes of women because all the resumes in their training were male. And that happens also with names that they're not familiar with. So you have to really make sure the algorithm is unbiased. And then, of course, all of us have our own biases. And so it becomes really complex. We have to step back and not be so dazzled by the speed of the output and go, wow, this is great. I've got it. Okay, put it in there and say to yourself, okay, is this what I want? What issues are there? Does this represent the people I want to represent? Does it represent my audiences? And if we don't do that, we'll get into trouble. And honestly, we talked about this. I mentioned this in the keynote. There is bound to be a big AI crisis at some point soon, but it's going to be a crisis where humans didn't pay attention. So a lack of human oversight. Because machines right now, they don't have agency. And we have to make sure that we double down on things like fact checking and just looking and critically assessing.
Yeah, so almost this isn't necessarily the response or the right response. It's a response to start from.
As a starting point, absolutely. Yeah, this is great, Martin. Thank you so much. And I was going to ask you a question about indoctrinating AI into industry cultures and talk about marketing, but we've really covered that. But I think what I'd rather do is call a quick audible and switch to your academic hat because I know you're a professor, right? You teach these topics at the university level. Master's degree students or
masters and some undergrads,
and some undergrad, as well. And so it's interesting. And the focus of our show is professional development, right? So, we're all about learning and teaching, and we have educators that listen and things like that. But it seems to me very interesting, the early conversations in the academic industry around AI. You probably were in some of these meetings. We're in with colleagues, and their first thought is what? Oh my gosh, cheating. Students are now going to use this to write their papers. And so therefore, it becomes, it's that academic pushback of, we need to, this is bad. And we've morphed now, I think a little bit. I'm seeing this in my institution. Maybe it's here, right? Just like everything else, go all the way back to Cliff Notes and things like that. And so we need to figure out how to use it. It's been interesting to see our academic industry change with the times on AI. And so I'd be curious to know if you're seeing that at your institution and just kind of how that progress has gone.
I am. And just so your listeners know, I teach at the York Schulich School of Business in Toronto, which is a business school in the marketing program there. And at first there was that reticence. And then, it almost was as if the institutions, and I've seen this from a number of institutions, have said, okay, students can use it. It's up to you to decide. So they kind of offloaded it. Whereas really, if anyone was paying attention, 2 or 3 years ago was when academic institutions should have started to develop policies. And part of it is we're all resistant to change. And so if you can get a machine to churn out a B essay at an undergraduate level, maybe you need to rethink how you are assessing students and get them to use it because you want to help them develop their critical skills, their writing skills. And from a marketing perspective, the students are going to be expected to to know how to use the tools in the same way that when social media came out, it was the interns and the younger people who were asked, okay, what do we do now? I think the same thing's going to happen at organizations. And this is where academics, but also organizations, the leadership needs to jump into AI too and spend some time figuring out what it does. So can you use it for an HR review? Can you pop in all this data and say, write a review? I met with a senior communicator who worked for an engineering company, and her CEO did her review and at the end said, by the way, ChatGPT wrote this. And she said she felt kind of,
If you pause, wouldn't it?
Yeah, a little hesitant and unhappy. And all of a sudden, yes, she can understand the greater consequences or ramifications, but how will that trickle down to everyone else? So there's so many questions that we have to address.
Yeah, that happened to me recently where a client, I'm working with the new innovation officer for a company. And I generally go, when I develop a strategic communication or marketing plan, send about 12 discovery questions, like enablers, barriers, what are your objectives? He tried to put it through He tried to put the questions through ChatGPT. And I said, how'd that work out for you? And it didn't. He goes, I think we're going to have to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, really, it's true because there is a sameness to the responses. If you're just thinking of ChatGPT as a final output, I think it's a starting point. I think it does writing, but we do writing too. And if we don't imbue our writing with some human creativity and empathy and, it's just going to have that dull sameness. And I think we've all found that. Right now, we can kind of tell.
Yeah, you can tell for sure. Yeah. And just one quick follow-up. In your classes, I know I started doing this in my classes, acknowledge the elephant in the room. Generative AI is here. It's able for you to use as students. But to try to get them to do that critically and make sure there's disclosure, here's what I used it for, here's the parts of my paper that were, aided by AI, things like that, so that they can see for themselves when there is that sameness, when there is that robotic nature of the writing, and they can begin to have a healthy appreciation for what it can and can't do. Right?
Yeah. And they have to be critical because the thing is, it's fast and it's okay.
Yeah, we're just okay.
Just okay. But it's like, wow, that's pretty good. Okay, I'll move on to the next thing because, a student or when you're doing a job, you want to get your tasks done. And you have to go beyond that and say, okay, here's a name. It suggested a name. Let me Google this name and see, oh, yeah, there's 10 other businesses that have this kind
of. Go to that deeper level of
research. Yeah. And that's really what you have to do. Now, the challenge is because, you ask students to write a reflection about what worked, what didn't. A few students put that through ChatGPT. And again, you can't say to them, you did that because you don't have proof, but there is that sameness. They're giving the same kind of dull, generic ideas, plus no typos. No typos.
Yeah, well, for a student, that's a dead giveaway.
And grammatical perfection. It's like, okay, machine.
Yeah, machine perform this.
We all make typos.
Yeah,
I make typos.
I love the focus on new students, and we're even thinking about the beauty of this is for all of us in the industry, whether you're a student, new in your career, mid-level, mid-career professional, somebody that's, more senior tenured career individual. You talked about some of the skills required that we need to adopt, and you mentioned altering workflows in your talk.
Yeah.
Aside from the, critical thinking skills, what are some other skills that professionals should be focused on or thinking about with, adopting AI technology or putting that into their workflow?
I think critical skills are really important. We talked a little bit about prompt engineering or learning how to speak to machines. I think that's a skill. Now, will we need that skill in 6 months or a year? Who knows? As the machines get better. But right now, that's a differentiator. Fact checking is a differentiator. And then how do you use the tools in an innovative way? So if you're just using it to write social media posts, that's like low-hanging fruit. Everyone can do that. How can you use AI to maybe create personas or help you create personas and then feed it different messages and say, okay, how would this persona react to this message? And again, take that with a grain of salt. You have to analyze that and then adapt. So it's a way of innovating what we do with a machine versus just sloughing off our work to machines. And I think that's hard. Any innovation is hard.
Yeah. The notion of personas, I think, is fabulous just based on our prior chat on bias. Is that a method of thinking about persona and incorporating persona development even to offset some of the bias concern? And I think one of the other things too, and I'd be interested on your view of this, is being able to critically think about an entire workflow from ideation, completion of a project, and can you put different AI tools in place to work in concert together to deliver an end product. So there's a project I'm working on where there's a whole workbook and training that we can do where an entire video, every component of the video, even to the individual speaking in the video, is AI generated off a persona. So that kind of combination, I'd be interested in kind of that. I mean, it's entirely AI generated.
Oh, I believe it. I mean, the tools are getting really good really quickly, in part because we're training them. We're using them. We're saying what's good, what isn't good. I think we do have to figure out where it fits, but always make sure that there's a human being at every level who's responsible for the oversight, and then one person at the end who has to step back and be critical and say, okay, is this right? Because say you have at the brainstorm stage an idea that is based on a study that didn't happen. And it keeps going through, and all of a sudden you've released this and you've released a news release or a blog post or any kind of marketing material based on something that didn't happen. That's on the people to have caught that. And we see so many examples. That lawyer who got AI to write the statement of claim, the brief, and it's like, well, check it, maybe, see if these cases actually happened.
Definitely. Well, and you mentioned the engineering firm too. I know a lot of engineering firms are looking at generative AI for design, but that doesn't, do you just turn that blueprint over and then build the building off of what AI put together? Or are there engineers QCing, doing quality and control and quality assurance? A lot of time spent checking that work, right?
Yeah. Same thing with coding. I mean, you can ask it to code, but now with coding, at least you can test it and see, does it work? And you'll see pretty quickly. Whereas with engineering, not so much. The consequences are further down the line.
Yeah, certainly.
I saw a cool photograph not long ago. I think it was posted maybe by Brian Solis, who we've talked about on the show before. He's terrific on the marketing comms side. I think he's an anthropologist by training. But anyway, Brian's got a photo. He was driving down a street in a northeastern city somewhere, and there's a construction company that is set up to build a building, and they've kind of draped a handmade sheet over the top, and the construction guys had written, "Hey, AI, try to do what we do," right? Because the scaffolding was up and they were laying the bricks and things like that. So, point being, there are some skills that are sort of timeless.
Oh yeah, plumbing is another one.
Plumbing, yeah, sure, yeah, right, yeah.
Especially with older houses, where you have different systems that have been cobbled together, and it would be very hard for a robot to figure that out.
When your toilet stopped up, you want help and you want it now, and that's probably going to be a human. Martin, again, goal of our show, professional development. I'm a communicator out there who maybe has a number of years under my belt, or maybe I'm a newer, and so this is all a little bit scary because this is new technology, or maybe I'm a student. What are kind of some of your go-to resources that you suggest to people in terms of staying on top, not just of where we are now with AI, but also where we're going in the future? I know you gave some resources in the keynote, but it'd probably be good to repeat some of those.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Well, one, and here's where my bias comes in because I'm a LinkedIn Learning instructor.
Yes, we should have mentioned that. Yeah, you can find Martin on LinkedIn Learning.
LinkedIn Learning has some really good courses. So I've done one, Generative AI for Marketers. It's a short course, but just gives people an overview of some of the things you might be able to do and you can do. There's a guy there, Dave Burss, BIRSS, and we'll put the link in the show notes. He has an incredible course called How to Research and Write Using Generative AI Tools. One, he's an entertaining guy. Comes from the creative background. He was a former creative director. And he really gives you a fantastic framework to learn how to communicate with machines. He has many other courses. Another resource is the Future of Marketing Institute. I'll post that too. That is out of the York Schulich School of Business. I'm the associate director of that. Professor David Rice founded it. And it's a great resource because we publish content on LinkedIn a couple times a day about what's happening and what you should pay attention to. Something else to check out is the 2 newsletters. The Neuron newsletter, which is a free daily newsletter, gives you a quick overview of AI and written in a very humorous way by 2 young guys. The second one is Axios AI Plus, also free. And again, worth subscribing to because it just helps you get a handle of what's happening. We have to educate ourselves. Most of us don't have computer science or coding or statistical backgrounds. So we have to figure out, okay, how can we take our storytelling or creativity skills and add that layer to them?
Those resources are probably a nice transition to our final question for you too, is even thinking about with AI, they probably point to what's next and are help thinking about what's next. And you've talked about deep fakes. We've talked about audio and generative content, that can come from AI. In your view, from a marketing and communication standpoint, what do you see as what's next?
It feels like augmented reality, which is powered by generative AI, is what's going to happen. And I don't mean when you have the headsets like Apple has or Meta with the pass-through glasses. I mean our glasses that have outward-facing cameras and inward-facing cameras, looking at our expressions. We have to think about both sides of this. So we have this data layer on the world that we can turn on and off. We can record pictures. We can have an AI assistant in our ears. We can talk to them and all of the implications around that. I don't think the metaverse is going to go away, but we also like interacting with people in the real world. And once that technology is there, it'll be interesting. I don't know how overwhelming it will be. Probably, if you have that data set in front of you, it will be overwhelming, but it'll be a different way of interacting with the world.
I'm ready to be Tony Stark. I don't know.
Yeah. Martin, this has just been a great conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming, obviously, to Business Communicators Summit. I just thought the keynote address was perfect because, we are all struggling with this in one way or the other, depending on where we sit in the marketing communications landscape. And so to have you come in and help us feel a little more comfortable and maybe not quite as terrified, I think has just been really, really important. So thanks for coming on today. And again, thanks for joining us here.
Truly appreciate it.
Thank you. And we're all newbies. That's the thing to remember.
For sure. Thanks.
If you found value in today's episode, check us out on our website, CultivatEDMarketer.com. You'll also be able to subscribe to us, rate us, and leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Remember, a garden of opportunity grows with Cultivated Marketer.